Hey HTDA and welcome back to Satisfactory. This is my bite-sized run, which is aimed at those of you who want to progress through this game without every build taking weeks to complete, but still have an awesome looking factory. And so far I would say we are succeeding at that pretty well. Last time around we only took a few hours to massively expand our steel facility, and we are now automating a huge amount of steel pipes, steel beams, as well as industrial beams, which we need to make all those Mark II miners that we're going to be building. We even have a sink attached to all of this, and we have a pretty decent amount of concrete production now up and running, so we're in a pretty good place. The main problem is now we are going to need a lot more iron production, about 600 iron per minute more, and we're also going to need some more copper production, which by itself is just a lot of fun to do. And if you do that with the use of a lot of trucks, which is what we're going to be doing, that should not be too big of a problem. However, in order to make sure we can expand on all those basics, we are going to need a lot more power. And speaking of power, we have a slight problem that some of you already pointed out in the comments that I got on the episode where we built the coal facility, is that, like you can see, the production is actually not stable. Our coal facility should be producing 600 megawatts per minute, or per second, or megawatts in general. I'm not sure how megawatts work, but anyway, it should be producing 600 of this, and it's not, as you can see. We are currently at a higher capacity because we do have biofuel burners, but we want to kind of solve this whole fluctuating problem and then expand on that because we're going to need a lot more power. Which brings me back to this awesome looking coal facility that's very simple to set up and that we want to expand upon in an efficient way, just so that we don't spend hours and hours on just expanding our power. Especially considering in the long term we're not going to be using coal for power for very long, so we definitely don't want to overdo it like I actually did in my initial run, where I built a huge coal facility and ended up only using like 25% of the power it generated for a very, very long time. So we want to be efficient about it, and that is what we're going to do. However, if you watched my previous episode on how to build this coal facility, you might also see that it looks slightly different now. And the basic design didn't actually change. We still have the 8 facilities, we still have the 3 pumps, we still have the truck. But the main thing that I changed, and that was actually thanks to one of you in the comments, so thank you for that. I actually do read all the comments, and sometimes there's pretty good suggestions in there. I actually built a second pipe, as you can see over here, that goes all the way over here to the back and then connects to the other end. And the second thing that I changed, it's not just a secondary pipe, but the one of the pumps actually connects to a different part of the pipe. So we have 2 of them going into this pipe, which is then being split between these 2 areas, and the third pump is actually going to in this pipe, and ideally going kind of all the way around, with the other 2 pumps going from this direction. Now, what does that do? Well, at least for now, it seems to fix the problem with the flow of the water, even though in theory it shouldn't be needed, because these pipes actually have a 300 throughput per minute, and we are actually using less than that. I should probably show you that over here. No, it's not. Well, actually, that's probably the reason why it now works, because we kind of split the flow of the water between 2 pipes rather than 1. We should be able to fill up 1 pipe completely with these 3 pumps, but for whatever reason, in the end of the pipe, it seems to work kind of in waves. The pumps don't actually have a steady production. They kind of like put the water in waves, and that turns the coal facilities on and off. But if you do it like this, so you have the water coming from 2 directions, even if it's the same amount of water, that seems to fix that problem. Not entirely sure why, so maybe someone in the comments can explain to me why it works like this and it doesn't work the other way. But at least having stable power is a lot more efficient than having 1 or 2 facilities kind of turning on and off every now and then. Okay, so we want to expand on this power, and the way I want to do it is I actually want to only use this truck station, so we don't set up another truck station, because truck stations also take quite a bit of power, and because currently we are using the Mark II belt, as you can see over here, and we now have Mark III belt, so we can actually double up on that and also double up on this entire facility. We are going to need to add in 3 more pumps if we do that, but we actually have quite a nice little pool of water over here that actually should fit 3 more pumps, assuming that we put in the pumps a little bit efficiently, because this isn't a very large pond, so it doesn't actually fit a lot more than those 3 pumps on top of that, but still, it should work. And the way I want to do it is I actually think we could build that second power facility up on this ridge over here. That has 2 advantages. We have the ramp over here that is then still accessible, and I think it will look very nice as well, which again is one of the goals of this series. So I'm not going to go through the actual building process too much in detail, because I'm basically just going to replicate this build that we have over here with a few small tweaks that I will touch upon when it's actually done. Just a quick side note about the awesomeness of the starting facility that I'm still using to get all my resources from, is that because our builds are now taking longer to complete, we can actually leverage the relatively slow production we have going on over here. So you can see I currently actually have over 100 rotors just waiting here for me, which should be more than enough to build our coal facilities, which means no more handcrafting, so yay! But just to give you the quick rundown, if you want to replicate my build exactly like I'm building it, you're going to have to start with a 5x10 platform. Then you're going to add in 8 total coal power plants on top of that. That should fit exactly on those 10 wide foundations that you have. You then connect lifts onto the ports, directly onto the ports of the coal facilities, and Mark 1 lifts will actually be sufficient. You can then connect the splitters directly to the top ports of the lift. You can then connect the splitters with a Mark III belt. Make sure it's a Mark III belt. And also make sure you hook it up to your already existing belt, which you do need to upgrade from Mark II to Mark III in order for this to work. So make sure you triple check that you didn't miss any belt segments in the previous build, because if you do, none of this will be actually working later on. Now, your aesthetics might be different, or your preferences for that might be different than those of mine, but I actually kind of like bringing this over on the exact height that it's built up. This specific facility will be slightly higher if you build it on the cliff where I have built it right now than the previous facility is. That's not a problem, but it does mean that you actually need to bring up this belt a little bit, and I actually choose to bring it over horizontally and then only bring it up and kind of have this little turn in here. But there's of course different ways in which you can do that. There's also different ways in which you can set up these lifts, like I've shown in the coal facility episode. So check back in that one if you want to look at some different options. Now we still need to fix the piping, so let's do that. And remember that pressing the control button actually makes it really easy to align pipes. And that, along with some power poles, should provide you with a pretty steady doubling up on your coal power. And as you can see, the facilities are up and running, and we have the same double pipe setup that we have at the other facility. We also have 3 pumps, and I raised the pipes in this case a little bit off the floor, so that it's very easy to get around this base still, so you can easily run under these. And we also still have easy access to our base over here. So if we jump down here, as you can see, we can go under this up here and still easily reach everywhere. So make sure that whenever you're building a facility, you leave some access for yourself so it's easy to move around. Now, before you start yelling at me in the comments, I do realize that half of the coal that we are now taking out of this truck station was actually supposed to go towards our hub. There is really no way around that, because either we are going to be relying on solid biofuel, or we are going to be kind of siphoning off some of our coal in order to make sure we have enough power. Or, of course, option 3 is that we build a coal facility somewhere else. Now the problem with that is that there's really no coal anywhere close to this area. There is some more coal all the way up here in a valley near a waterfall, but that's actually really inconveniently far away. So if you want, you can definitely go and build a coal facility over there. You just scan for the coal and you will find actually a lot of coal and a lot of water really accessible over there. The problem is it's quite far away, so I just prefer making use of what we already have. And we can always expand our coal facility in a different way later, upgrading the miners, upgrading the throughput very easily. Now we have everything set up and fix that problem as we go. I will do that, don't worry, but for now that does mean that we're kind of reducing our steel production just a little bit, but right now we're not using it, so don't worry about that too much. Okay, so now we have the power situation fixed. Let's focus on expanding those basics that I mentioned at the start. So remember this tiny little concrete facility? Right next to that is actually 2 normal iron nodes. And since we're going to need a lot of basics, we might as well start with the basics of the basics, and that is iron plates. We are going to need pretty much exactly 2 full normal nodes at Mark II miners in order to make us a whole bunch of plates, have enough for everything that we need for the higher tier items, but also have a little bit of left over, because I do want to make sure that our hub is actually going to function as a hub. So rather than using our facility that we started out with, which is producing a little bit of everything, we're going to be producing a lot more of everything, and also have a little bit of surplus for our building needs, which of course are going to be increasing as we scale things up. So we're going to need more than just a few plates per second, as well as everything else. So 2 normal nodes should be enough to get that going. It's also a pretty nice location. I think we have the other iron nodes over there, we have the concrete over there, we have the coal. So basically we're just slowly industrializing this area. And you can also have a little bit of fun with the actual layout designs. For example, you could do something like this, and rather than going with the standard smelter, constructor, since it's a 1-to-1 ratio where they build like this, I went for a more blocky kind of district design for this particular build. Nothing really special, it's just a little bit more interesting than doing the same thing over and over, and it's still pretty efficient. What's actually as efficient as pretty much any other build, it just looks a lot more interesting. There's more moving parts going around, so let me quickly walk you through this. So first up, we have 2 Mark II miners, each producing 120 iron ore per minute, for a total of 240 iron ore per minute, almost filling up a Mark III belt. Now you can afford to get a little lazy at this point. Since we're producing so much iron, you can just slap Mark III belts everywhere, especially considering we're not making huge buses or anything like that. You don't actually need that much steel in order to make all these belts, so you might as well just use the highest Mark I and make sure you don't mess up your system anywhere by using slower belts. One special note here is actually that these smelters are set up in such a way that the splitters are actually kind of almost inside the smelter. This is the most minimalistic way you can set this up. So you can see these are connected. The smelters are actually side by side as well. There's a little room in between there, it looks like, but if you look at the hitbox, you will actually see that they're connected to each other. And of course, this thing actually uses the minimum amount of space. You still need to connect a belt between the splitter and the actual machine. You won't actually see that there is a belt, but if I remove one of these, then a small portion of belt will stick out, which you can just place. I'll just show you just quickly. So let's say we place one of those over here, then you can just kind of hover in between, double click, and that will place a belt. You can't see anything was placed, but it will still keep working, as you can see. Now I completely messed this up, I'll fix this in a moment. But don't forget that you also have the Mark II power poles, so you don't you can get a little bit more creative with how you place your power lines. Doesn't really matter how you do it, but you might as well have some fun with it. The outputs of the smelters are going to go nicely around all the way over here, and then fit nice and tight into this area over here where they're split off between the output of one of these splitters. Half of that is going to go into this line of constructors, and of course the other half is going to go around. Then these constructors all combine back in the middle, and once again we have an outgoing belt all the way around, going into the truck station, which is of course nicely aligned. Yes, it's actually on exactly the same line as the other truck station we already have. We also have the platforms set up in a identical way as the other one. So when you're now approaching this facility from like the outside, it kind of looks a little bit more organized, just because you have those 2 truck stations up and running there. And well, of course there's no truck actually driving here just yet, but we'll fix that in a moment as well. Speaking of which, it doesn't actually matter that much when you're making a hub setup like we're doing over here, where you place the truck stations, as long as you make sure you have enough room to work around with in your hub area, which we do. I mean, look at all this space. We have quite a lot of space to work with. And the truck is going to come from the same direction as all our other trucks, and it kind of looks really cool to have a line of truck stations all next to each other. So I think I'm just going to build the truck station over here and then bring the belt in this direction, which is the open space that we have left, to build the remaining part of our hub. And there we go. As you can see, we now have a truck incoming tractor. Actually, it's not a truck, but I'm just gonna keep calling them trucks anyway. And as you can see, we have more iron plates than we're ever going to need, at least in terms of how much we're ever going to need for crafting. We have 90 per minute incoming right now. Actually looks like it's more because it's on a Mark III belt and it's just trying to empty this truck station, but it's actually only going to be 90 per minute for the moment. Now, you might be wondering why there's two belts over here, and that's because, once again, I set up a smart splitter with an overflow to the left, and this splitter is actually on this other splitter connected, so it goes right onto the belt going into our sink. Now, of course, our storage unit is not quite full just yet. As you can see, it's filling up very fast. But yeah, as soon as this is full, all the rest of the plates are going to go on this belt into the sink, just making sure that we're not actually wasting any production. Once again, you'll keep hearing me say this, but I lift all the belts off the ground so I can easily walk around. We don't have to jump over anything. It's very straightforward setting this up once again as a hub. I'm really liking how this is working out. I had the theory all in my mind, but actually seeing it come into practice is a different thing. So yeah, very organized, very simple, at least. Well, it's just iron plates incoming for the moment, but of course this is just the first step that we need in order to actually make our higher tier items. Now we're going to need a few more basics. Once you've set up the coal facility, the additional coal facility I should say, as well as the iron plates facility, and set up the truck lines, you're probably going to be spending about 2 hours-ish, depending on, of course, on how fast you play, etc. So I think that makes for a very nice bite-sized part of this run. Now, there's one last thing I do want to mention before we hold off, which is actually really important. So, as you can see, I have a whole mess. Let me jump on this constructor for a moment so you can actually see. We have a whole... That was not what I wanted to do. Well, let's stick with the constructor then. Splitter, sorry. As you can see, we have a whole mess of truck routes here, and I actually think I should have done that differently. So if you're seeing this and you're still working on your truck routes, please do it from the get-go. And what I mean by that, I should have made like one side of this area being the incoming trucks, and then the other side of the area being the leaving trucks. Reason being that there is a risk now that trucks are going to be colliding, and I've avoided most of that risk by actually keeping the truck routes apart. But you can make it a little bit more organized if you have basically trucks driving on the left or right, depending on your preference, and then only making them cross paths just before splitting off into the truck facilities. By the way, just look at those 3 trucks waiting to drive off again for their next load. It's beautiful. Anyway, yeah, so there is a small risk that trucks can collide. Now, if they collide, it's actually not necessarily a problem. They do tend to restore themselves. But if it happens at the wrong junction, especially if they crash like into each other from opposite directions, you can get a warning that there's a deadlock between your trucks. I've had that happen once so far. Actually, not with these lines, but strangely enough with the coal line here in the back. Not entirely sure why that happened actually, but I did get that message just once, and that just means that your trucks are going to stop. Now, it's very easy to reset them. You just hop into one, drive it off a few meters, and then set it to autopilot. Again, it will find its way back to its path. But of course, rather you wouldn't be doing that. So you can avoid that just by making sure you have this nice little highway with 2 sides. Now, speaking of highways, at some point we are probably going to want to make this look a lot more professional. But right now we are just focused on progressing, so we're going to do that at a later stage. A little bit of a simple episode, at least in terms of what we're building, but we're really seeing our hub come together, so I still hope you enjoyed it. If you're still here, you're awesome. Make sure that you like and subscribe, leave a comment. All those things really help out the channel and help out me as a result of that, so thank you if you do so, and I hope to catch you in the next one.